Oh man, I wish more people would watch this video. I know it won't get a lot of hits because of the topic, but I'm telling you right now, you gotta love when a inexpensive part just goes toe to toe with like a Goliath in a space. Today we are taking the new Montech NX600 twin tower air cooler and pitting it against the $130 Noctua NH-D15S Chromax, a $29 cooler versus a $129 cooler. You can't possibly be anywhere near as good, because if price has told us anything, price equals quality, right? Whether you're gaming on the go, working remotely, or setting up a second screen at home, Viewsonic's portable gaming monitors let you play anywhere, anytime, without sacrificing performance. Meet the VX1654 and the VX1754. Ultra slim, ultra light, and built for gamers who want desktop-level power in their backpack. At just 0.7 inches thin, these displays slip into any bag, making them perfect for travel, LAN parties, or creators on the move. And you're getting 144 Hz refresh rate, buttery smooth motion, and AMD FreeSync for tear-free gameplay. And the best part, one cable, a single USB-C handles your power, data, video, and audio. No clutter, no dongles, and no stress. They work with laptops, tablets, phones, and of course your consoles. Switch, PS5, Xbox, you name it. Plus the built-in kickstand cover protects your screen and lets you set up in landscape or portrait wherever you're posted up. Need more than gaming? Well, Viewsonic's full portable lineup includes OLED models, touchscreen options, and even built-in batteries, giving you flexibility to work and play from literally anywhere. Upgrade your mobile setup with the Viewsonic Portable Gaming Series, performance that travels with you. Learn more by clicking the link in the description below. You know, there's a few components when it comes to building a computer that are just unsung heroes. They're not exciting, right? That would be like air coolers, heck, even this day, like AIOs, right? It's kind of crazy. You go to a Micro Center and you go to the cooling section, and they have far more AIOs on the shelf than they do air coolers. And I think that's because of the component just demand when it comes to power and heat these days for CPUs is just kind of forced a lot of the industry to just have to sort of adopt liquid cooling as sort of the mainstream cooling method these days because things are so hot. But we know air coolers are very capable of supporting up to like 250 watts TDP. Like the Be Quiet Dark Rock Pro is 250 watts. Noctua uses their own values, like so you can't directly compare what. In fact, they didn't even put their TDP ratings on the box. Neither did Montech. Montech didn't put theirs on this box either. Neither did they put it in the review guide. But I'm gonna tell you right now, there's some very key differences between these two coolers, and I think it's gonna be evident on the charts. So just a couple of things to talk about right here. It supports obviously all your standard sockets, everything from LGA 11.5X all the way up to AM5. It's got two of the 28 millimeter thick 120 millimeter fans. So already just that extra 3 millimeters between 25 mil and 28 mil is gonna make a difference when it comes to the pressure. And I feel like if you clip that, you could just apply that to so many things in life, but I digress. We try and keep this into a family show. But the RPM range between the fans are 800 to 2000 RPM. The bearing is an HDB, technically a fluid bearing, just not technically a fluid dynamic bearing, it's a HDB bearing or hydrodynamic, whatever. It says it's got 85.09 CFM. Now here's the thing, I'm assuming that's both fans combined, but when it comes to specs on the box, it's one of those things that you just kind of sort of take it with a grain of salt. But things that you need to know are gonna be like the dimensions. It's 160 millimeters tall. Outside of small form factors, it's gonna fit in pretty much all of your chassis. But when it comes to height on things like the Noctua, they can easily get up to 170 millimeters in height because of the fan offset. So when it comes to air coolers like this, especially twin towers, you can see you have a fan that's like kind of overhanging on one side. You want to make sure, obviously, you're push-push, right? So you want to make sure that you're not going pull-pull, because none of the air on the front will be as efficiently being pulled through the heatsink on the front versus pushed. So that's about the only thing you need to think about when it comes to installation. But as you can see on the 120 millimeter fans, there isn't much of an overhang like allowance when it comes to tall RAM, especially when you're pushing and that's the side that the fan is gonna be above the RAM. They do have an indent built into the heatsink, but unless you're gonna offset the fan really high and then have a lot of the fan no longer blowing air through the heatsink, that might be a trade-off you have to make depending on your RAM. Now the test setup that we're using is our standard case testing setup because everything is locked down, which gives us really good apples to apples comparison. We are using lower profile RAM in there. It doesn't have, it's the Crucial DDR5 Pro, not the newest Pro, but the older Pro, which is a lower profile. If we had any higher profile RAM in there at all, we would have had to have moved that fan up. Now the Noctua, as you can see, has a much larger indentation area built in right here, but the fan, because they're 140 millimeter fans versus 120 millimeter fans, have a bigger diameter, which means more incursion, if you will, on potential RAM interference. But that's going to be true for any twin tower cooler when it comes to RAM clearances. So that's just one of the caveats you need to know when you're installing something like this, is your RAM height is going to play into this. Now the reason why I'm even bringing this up is when it comes to our testing, I was able to fit it with all of the entire 120 millimeter surface area of the fans, pushing air through the heatsink. Installation's pretty standard, it's pretty straightforward. The hardware almost feels like it's pulled off of a manufacturing shelf, maybe from other coolers, maybe different ODMs, I don't know. It's pretty standardized. If you can install a backplate and you can put some standoffs and some screws, you can install it. The fan's attached with the standard clip style fans that you're pretty used to seeing on just about everything these days. Comes off pretty easily, just hooks onto the fan and then hooks onto the cooler. So nothing too crazy to mention right there. That is how you would adjust your offset if you needed to raise it higher to have more clearance for your RAM, which looks kind of stupid, but it's possible because RAM is so tall these days, especially with how hot RAM likes to be. Now, one of the nice things about the NX600 is it's got these little caps that install on the end, because the top of the heatsink's usually pretty boring looking. Heck, even Noctua doesn't have a cap, as you can see right there. It's just got the top of the heat pipe showing. So there is that. But the nice thing about this is you do get this little cover that it's just a pressure fit, snaps right on there, and it looks nice. So whether you've got white, which is what I tested, as you can see in the rig behind me, silver heatsink on both, by the way. The only difference is the plastic trim and the fans are either going to be black to match the black setup, or white. But the heatsink otherwise is the same identically. There's no Cerakote, there's no ceramic coat. It's just bare aluminum heatsink fins. Now, speaking of fins, there's a stack of 52 fins high. Comparing that with the Noctua NH-D15S Chromax, there are 38 fins high when it comes to their full depth fins, and then 5 fins of their shallower fins. So that's one thing to point out. Of the 52 on here, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them are slightly shallower, as you can see, but the shallower indentation on the Montech cooler is not as exaggerated as what's on the Noctua. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. It's a $29 cooler that absolutely feels like more than $29 of quality. If anyone has installed or used any of the Hyper 212 Evos, you know the price on those. First of all, that cooler has been legendary. It has been around for decades, and it has always hovered right around that $25 to $33 to $35, sometimes $40 range, depending on the market, depending on if it's a bare silver or if it's painted black, if it's got RGB or whatnot. The pricing on this is absolutely ridiculous. So we'll just get into the pricing right now before we show the performance, because I think at that point, for most people, the performance may not even matter anymore at that point, because this is out of the affordability range for so many people. $130 air cooler that will absolutely be destroyed by AIOs that cost half as much. But a lot of people still just are not comfortable with the extra moving parts and the inherent risk you take with water cooling. So black is $29.90 at Newegg right now. It's also on Amazon. I'll put links down below. The RGB version, you can see I have an RGB box right here. Clearly there's gonna be a premium for RGB. A $3 premium. Well, white clearly has to cost more. Yeah, you're right. Exactly $1 more. There's a $1 premium for white on top of black. And the same $3 difference for ARGB and non-RGB for white. So we're talking from the cheapest black non-RGB at $29.90. It's like, I think $33.90 for white with RGB. Why can't other brands do that? If Montech can do it, why can't everyone else? All right, let's get into the performance numbers. We tested this, like I said, with our standard testing hardware, but No case side panels or anything on. It was fully open. That way the case is not influencing the performance at all. This is strictly cooler performance. We did 2 different modes here. Wait, if this is European 3, is that European 2? Or is that just loser? Is that 2? Is that 1? Okay, so 42 decibels noise normalized for the fans between both, and then a 100% fan speed run. Now, let's go and take a look at the first chart here. The first chart is just the NH-D15S Chromax on its own. I did a P-core average and an all-core average. I didn't do P-core, E-core separate, it's just P-core and all-core. You can see right now that I do give you definitive numbers at the end of this, but I'm just showing you what the temperature looks like over time. It hits equilibrium very quickly, right around the 150-second mark. Is like, that's it. It is fully reached full temp right there. Ambient temperature in this space is 21 C today. It's a little bit cooler, but you can see that it's hovering right around the 75 C mark for the P cores, and then the all cores is a little bit lower, right around 72 C. That's simply because the E cores obviously pull less power. But what happens when you take a cooler that is 23.07% of the cost of the cooler it's compared to, and you lay them over top? Well, you can see right here with the orange line and the red line, it overlays a couple of degrees warmer on top of the Chromax, the Noctua Chromax. Now, at the end of the day, on this chart, it might look like it's a bit higher. It's really not. It's within a couple of degrees. The chart tops out at TJ Maxx for the 13900K at 105C. So as you can see, neither of these coolers are anywhere near, even under an AIDA64 stress test with both cache and core, going full tilt 253 watt PL1 and PL2 limit. It pulls about 238 to 240 watts fully sustained under load with that test. 240 watts of actual heat, like power draw, whatever that converts to into the heat. It is insane how close together these two coolers are. And I thought to myself, like, man, I honestly thought that right off the bat, that the Montech NX600 would perform a little bit better. Now, when we compare the entire CPU package, that's obviously the memory controller, any of the IO, obviously the cache, the CPU, not just core temps. There's more that happens inside the package of the CPU that has to be cool. So CPU package is an important thing to look at too. But you can see at 42 dB normalized, the yellow line represents the Montech NX600. And as you can see, it is a little bit above the Noctua, hovering right around 82 to 85 C, a couple of spikes that hit about 87 C. The blue line, which is the Noctua, as you can see, is hovering right around the 80 C mark, spiking into about 84 to 85 C. Now, what happens when we turn the fans to 100%? Well, the CPU package at 100%, you'll notice that the yellow line is no longer above the blue line. In fact, the yellow line comes down below the blue line on average, which is kind of crazy. The blue line doesn't really move, actually. If Phil was to kind of go back and forth between these two charts, actually, the blue line tends to move up ever so slightly at 100%. It's kind of like when we've started doing our case testing methodology and found that at 100% fan speed, a lot of these cases for the CPUs start to run a couple of degrees warmer. And we think that's due to turbulence. I think that's due to just how much of the fans actually overhang off of the Noctua NH-D15S Chromax. And so what happens is you start to get a really interesting, maybe a turbulence effect, where a lot of the air is actually just kind of bypassing the cooler itself, because air is a fluid and it wants to take the path of least resistance. I'm just guessing here. I haven't done a deep dive into this, but I want to, because I want to know why I keep turning fan speeds up and temps start to increase. That seems completely counterintuitive, because on water cooling, running the air through the radiator as fast as you can, temperature absolutely scales with fan speed. But on the air coolers and the overall case testing, it has shown an opposite effect. Except for the NX600, as you can see right here, which starts to outperform the Noctua. That's why I think it's maybe an overlapping fan issue when it comes to so much of the fan blades not even pushing air through the fins at all, because of the very intentional design of the NX600's heatsink literally being 120 by 120, means all of that air is being forced through the heatsink. That means every single amount of air molecule, or whatever you want to call it, is able to pick up heat and pull it away, which is the entire point. So this brick, ow, not a sharp edge, but you probably shouldn't run your fingers along the edge right there. And that's true for any of these, by the way. All of the air going through the heatsink. My issue with a lot of the Noctua coolers is so much of the air has always just bypassed the heatsink. So I feel like that's honestly what we're noticing at play right here is the fan speed go up, the temp go down because air have nowhere to go but through heatsink, which is a very good design as far as I'm concerned. And because of the fact that they stuck to a 120 by 120 square, means it actually will fit in more cases too than the Noctua, because if you look at that offset on height, even with the fans like right here, and even the height of the heat sinks, I think it makes a big difference. Now, before we go into the actual temperature numbers here, the one thing I wanted to rule out was making sure that under 42 dB and 100 dB, that there's no fluctuation between our CPU power draw. So these next two charts right here, the first one, as you can see, is the fans at 100%. The yellow line represents the NX600 runs. The blue line represents the Chromax runs. You can see the temperatures are equal across. They're all trading places, but they're exactly along the same line. And then same thing at the 42 dB. They're exactly across the same line. So no cooler got an advantage because one was running maybe 10 watts less or something like that. They are quite literally parodied, which is the whole point of a lockdown system. Now, if we look at the temperature charts right here, and I sort by coolest. And remember, coolest is at the bottom of this chart. Now, the problem is it's not gonna look very tapered because the temperatures are all so freaking consistent here. The warmest configuration was actually the NX600's 42 dB fans at P-core average of 77, all-core average of 75, and a package temperature average of 83.5. Now, the 100% fans for the Chromax was the second hottest position, which I already said I think that has something to do potentially with the fan turbulence, because you'll notice the absolute coolest performing CPU or CPU cooler on here right now is actually the Noctua by 0.3 C. That's 0.3 on package. I sorted by package. You'll notice all-core and P-core for the Montech NX600 at 100% versus the Noctua Chromax at 42 dB are exactly the same, at 74 for the P-core average and 73 for the all-core average. So why is that? That comes entirely down to the noise profile. Where Noctua really excels is being very quiet. The Noctuas are very quiet. There's less of a fin stack, which means less turbulence of air going through it. You all know if you take a fan and spin it in wide open space, it makes very little noise. You put it against a radiator, you put it against a mesh grill, or you put it against a heat sink, the air is bouncing off those fins and that creates a sound profile. Unfortunately for Montech, their 28 millimeter thick fans, which are very good at static pressure, are unfortunately quite a bit louder than the 140 millimeter fans found from Noctua. Smaller profile fans make more noise than larger profile fans because they tend to spin faster. Now, at 100%, if you just degaff the noise, and in this instance right now, it was pushing closer to 49 decibels, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 42 to 49 is a pretty big jump in noise factor. Our Noctua cooler was running 82% versus 74% for the Montech at the 42 decibel profile. So the Montech was slightly warmer at the 42 dB because the fans were turning so much slower, and the CFM is obviously going to suffer. So here is where you have to kind of come to the conclusion. If you were like, I would rather keep more money in my wallet at the cost of a little bit more noise, then the Montech is definitely going to be for you. Now we're talking obviously at 100% fan profile, because at 42 dB normalized, the difference here is 1.2 C, no, 2.2 C, 83.5 versus 81. So 2.5 C difference on the package. 77 versus 74 and 75 versus 73. So you're gonna cost 3 C warmer for the Noctua at 42 dB for the P cores, and you're gonna cost 2 cores warmer for the E cores at the savings of $100. You all know you need that $100 right now just to pay for the extra rise in cost of RAM, just to get the same shit you would have gotten 6 months ago for that price. So at the end of the day, brands like Montech make me very excited again for the PC space because they're shaking things up. Like, I guarantee the lower end single tower coolers you can get from Noctua, which are still $50, $60, twice the price of this guy, will absolutely get destroyed by this guy. In fact, I think that needs to be one of our next tests. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching today's video. Hopefully you've kind of just reprogrammed your mind on thinking, certain price points are just completely unnecessary. The $130 NH-D15S Chromax. I keep pointing that out, S Chromax, because the NH-D15 is a different cooler. It costs more. It's $175 and it has significantly more heat pipes. Could you imagine? Like, it makes me wonder now, how close would this be to that cooler? Anyway, 30 bucks versus 130 bucks. $1 premium for white, $3 premium for RGB. Can you really argue with that? I think those naysayers out there right now are having to try really hard to find something to nitpick about this. You know what? Have at it. I'm curious as to how shallow you can get. All right, guys, 30 bucks. It's kind of hard to argue with the numbers.